All right, so I have done a few videos on how I go about roughs. So I highly recommend you check out my Intro to Comic Craft playlist for that. Otherwise, I'm just going to be covering the exact same material here. But I do want to talk to you guys a little bit about forms of constructive human anatomy. So those of you who watch this channel, you know I have a very, very cartoony sort of anime manga inspired style. So you might think that I don't really need to use construction, or you might, if you have a similar style, or if you want to have a similar style, you might think you never need to learn human anatomy. And I have to say that is the furthest thing from the truth. Even the most stylized, cartoony styles have a basic system of drawing, a basic system of how they handle the characters, how they think about the characters, how a character is handled consistently, shot after shot or page after page. For me, mine is actually fairly closely based on human anatomy, and I highly recommend you check out the Glenn Vilppu drawing manual. I was recently notified that it is no longer available on Amazon, so you might want to like watch the listing, because I think they're redoing the book, maybe a new edition, and so they've pulled existing listings from the internet. But if you do get a chance to get a hold of it, or if your library has it, and boy, that would be a great library, you should definitely check it out. And it is combined with what I learned in Paul Hudson's Constructive Human Anatomy class at SCAD, and it's a grad level, well, no, it's an older student slash grad level course. Which is no longer being taught, unfortunately, but well, it's taught by Dove now, but I really feel like Paul was the guy to do it. It was a great course, and even he was like, you have a really cartoony style. Why do you want to learn constructive human anatomy? Because you can always get better. Stylized, cartoony, simplified style, they're still based on how a human is built, but it is just less... you're using less detail. So I'm going to slap in a quick perspective grid. Gonna go ahead and draw in that horizon line, which tells me that little brother is actually too high up, because he and I have the same, move this packet of paper which doesn't belong there. He and I have the same eye line almost, and in this story he's like, I'm 13, so he's 8. So he should actually be shorter. And I'm going to use the lines I sketched in to serve as sort of a guide for how I'm going to render this car window. And this is a Dodge Intrepid from '93. So I'm going to go ahead and fill in my perspective, and I'll meet you guys when I'm ready to talk about human anatomy. Alright, so I've got the basic perspective grid set up, and this is our horizon line. So I'm going to start by blocking in the kids, and this was already a fairly tight sketch, although there's not a whole lot of facial details. There's definitely enough body movement details to be able to tell. So I usually draw torsos in as a rectangle, and then I draw an egg for the rib cage. Now, having this piece of paper, which catches on my paper every time I draw, does sort of put a hamper on things. If you're wondering why I'm sketching with non-photo blue lead, you can head on over to nattosoup.blogspot.com, or you can click the card right here, because I wrote an in-depth post on using non-photo blue lead for your sketching endeavors. So when I'm sketching in characters, I start with really rough details first, and then work my way progressively tighter. I call this big to small, and I've heard other art professionals use similar techniques. Wow, this is really getting on my nerves, because it's catching. And the lead I'm using is Color Eno lead in soft blue. And you can find a link to that in the description below. I get mine on Amazon. There are definitely other places online where you can find this lead. And it's actually in a Color Eno soft blue mechanical pencil, which is not quite my favorite mechanical pencil, but it'll do. So for the head, I start with a sphere, extend it out into a plane, divide it in half, going both ways, and this line here is where I'm going to line the eyes up. And I find it's helpful, if you're working traditionally like this, I find it's helpful to keep my physical thumbnails in proximity, because sometimes when you're putting this much blue on the paper, it'll be hard to see where your original lines were, and you lose track of what you were drawing. So I said I need to make him smaller because he's a little younger. Actually, he's a lot younger when you think of the difference between 8 and 13. And you see why I put down the scrap paper. It allows me to draw the figure all the way through. That's not going to work. See, his neck's too long, his head's too high up. I was basically drawing it almost where. Alright, sorry about that. My camera's been giving me so much trouble today. So, as you guys can see, I did start sketching in some of the background. If you need a little primer on perspective, I highly recommend you, again, head on over to my Intro to Comic Craft playlist. I have several videos in there that should help you out. And I'm just tightening up my younger brother's figure a bit. I primarily work with a system that utilizes long cylinders and sometimes cylinders that vary in width. Sorry, I caught the end of my page there. In order to accurately sort of sketch in my anatomy and my figures. And I'll try to zoom in for you guys. I know not being able to see exactly what I'm doing is kind of a big problem. My hand tends to override the camera, which I do apologize for. I'm going to work on being more cognizant of that when it happens. It was certainly an issue with my head for a while. It's a bad combination of traditional media and poor eyesight, I guess. Alright, so we've got our figures sort of sketched in here. Oh, her hand would be down. That's the seat back. So I can start tightening up the faces, and this is a more stylized character design. It's sort of a simplification of my usual style, and the eyes are actually very widely spaced apart. So I'm drawing one huge eye width, and then I'm drawing the two eyes off to the sides. And then I'm drawing, so when I draw eyebrows, I actually draw a circle around the eye first. And this is something that I picked up out of Drawn to Life. And I find it's a lot easier for me to place eyebrows when I do them that way. And almost everything else about my style is going to remain the same. And now I'm at the point where I can start tightening details. Her body language doesn't quite read that she's resting her hand on the eye rest. It's almost like a little embarrassed sort of gesture, but that's not the actual intention. And unfortunately, my phone is going to run out of space before I'm gonna even get close to finishing this page, let alone, well, this panel is not gonna get finished on camera, but neither will the page. But I do have a character design video that was done for this piece and done in this style, and that should be up on the channel as well. So off camera, I'm going to go ahead and finish him up and tighten this panel, and I'll check back in with you guys. Alright, so I've finally finished this panel. I know it's taken me a while. I just slammed my toe into my chair. Ow. Dang it. So it's time to remove the blue tape, and you want to be kind of careful because you want to avoid tearing at least your rough. And I do use the same sheets of scrap paper over and over and over again, so I also want to avoid tearing my scrap paper. So I'll check in with you guys once this panel has been freed from its prison. So we're onward and upward to our next shot, which is actually a down shot. And it includes 4 people, if I can get them fit in. My father, my mother, myself, and my younger brother. And being careful about placement when you're doing your thumbnails will really help you out when you're doing your roughs. It means you don't have to actually rethink where your characters are located. So I'm going to go ahead and give this a border of scrap paper, and then I'll check in with you guys. Alright, so we've got that border all nice and in place around our image. So the next thing we want to go ahead and do is draw in that horizon line. And since this is a down shot, it means the horizon line is actually going to be really high up. And this is probably going to be a 1-point perspective shot just for my own mental health. So I'm going to divide the panel in half with an X like this to find my midpoint, and then I'm going to go ahead and mark it, and radiating from this central line I'm going to draw several lines which are going to form my perspective grid. So I'm going to go ahead and complete that. Alright, so we've got that grid knocked out. Now it's time to start sort of blocking things in a bit. So I'm going to start roughing in the background. Just so that I sort of get an idea of where everything is. And I'm also going to start casually blocking in the characters. So we'll start with Dad, starting with that rectangle and drawing through with the egg for the rib cage and a hole for the head to come, for the neck rather, and get the arms in. Since this is a down shot, down from here, we're going to have a view more of the top of his head. And I'll zoom in. Helps to be able to rotate a sphere in space. So I'm going to go ahead and block out all 4 of the characters in this scene, and I'll check back in with you guys. All right, so I have everything sort of roughed in. It's still pretty loose. So now I need to focus on getting this tightened up and getting the details in. But as you guys can see, I started big and I worked small. I tried to block in the body of the car and then fill in with the characters, because it's so much easier to do that at this stage than it is to draw the characters out and then try to draw the car around them. Okay, so again, now that everything's blocked in, we're going to start refining some of the details here. And that usually means for me tightening up the characters a bit so that they just sort of look more like themselves. But it also means in this instance tightening up the environment as well. And it might seem like I'm making a mess, and I am making a mess, but that is what blue lines are all about. We tighten that up with the pencils later. Because the support beams of the car would be closer to the passengers. Now for character design reference, this is hard because Dad is going bald a bit, so I have to push back the hairline. That's right, doing the expanded middle eye. And sometimes, if things start getting messy the way they are here, I will either start erasing some of those blue lines, and that's just purely so that I can read it a little bit better, or I will start penciling just to sort of help me see better. Really, the roughs, like the thumbnails, are a stage that's all about you and your needs. Unless you're working with an editor and then you gotta do what they need. But if you're doing this for yourself, for your webcomic, or perhaps even for an anthology project, or if you don't have an editor who wants to check in with you every stage, then don't worry about being any tighter than what works for you. When I did Momotaro, and that was several years ago, but when I did Momotaro, I was looking at my old photos from the time period, and for a blog post, and I remembered that I actually did a lot of my drawing work in my pencil stage and then just inked on top of that. So I actually didn't solve too many problems in the rough stage, and the reason I did it that way is I had a serious time crunch, and I really needed to get, I think where I decided to cut time was in the rough phase. Make Dad look a little crazy. And I'm also keeping in mind, and I want you guys to keep in mind, that I am probably going to do a fair amount of correcting with digitally after I finish these and scan them. So something you see me doing here may not be something I opt to keep. And that is also okay. When you're making art, it doesn't have to be perfect every step of the way. You can take your time and find it and make the best piece you can. That's actually something I really dislike about doing art on YouTube, is that it really kills the revision phases. It's just because of the time limitations for me, it's just harder to make the corrections I need to correct, and so I've started developing some bad habits which make for better YouTube content but make for worse finished pieces. I'm actually pressing way too hard with my pencil. I'm working almost directly on that glass surface. So usually I recommend have like a couple sheets of paper underneath, especially if you enjoy drawing with mechanical pencil. Okay, that's parents down. That's how I go through blue lead so fast. I mean, I just eat, basically. Not really, but you guys know I go through blue lead very quickly. It's a little frustrating, honestly. I ran out at a sort of really bad time last week, and it took a couple days for it to come in. So I had to get creative and use 0.5, which wrecks my hand. But it's because I grip too hard and I press down too hard as well. A good friend of mine suggested maybe I was left-handed, and my parents tried to push, or the teachers, some adult in my life tried to push right-handedness. But you know, my left hand, I've tried to do, my left hand is just so not willing to cooperate with me. I can't do anything with my left hand, so I seriously doubt. I wish. Wouldn't that be great? Like, undiscovered life hack. Actually, I mentioned him before, but I know a guy who trained his left hand to sort of take over so that he could draw all of his favorite weeaboo stuff while saving his dominant hand for work. And it seems like a major time commitment if you work basically 12 hours a day like I do. I tried it and I was like, oh my god, because he's like, I spend an hour every day training my left hand, doing the left-handed training, and it's just like, oh man, that's like starting completely all over again. And I already have a problem when I'm trying to get two comics, like I am with Cicada Summer and Kara. When I'm trying to get two comics done kind of at the same time, I already have a problem with there just not being enough time in the day. Alright, so that has been completely blue line. Now I need to tighten it up with my pencil. And I like to use a softer lead because it goes over so when you use as much non-photo blue as I have here on this page, it basically creates a waxy resist buildup, and it makes it harder for graphite to go down. So instead of trying to carve into it with a harder lead, I just cover over it with a softer lead. Now, if your sketchbook, if your notebook is going to see a lot of movement, like let's say you're traveling and it's in a backpack, it's getting jostled around a lot, that's going to actually, the graphite's going to be, because it's on this waxy surface, it's going to be more prone to rubbing away. So you may end up with areas where your graphite is much lighter because it was rubbed away from movement. So that's just something to keep in mind. I honestly, when I'm traveling and I'm doing travel sketches, I don't like using graphite or non-photo blue lead at all. I just try to sketch in colored pencil or in Well, in ink. Sorry, it's really hard for me to do both, to be honest. So I know I am also blocking my light source, and I'm doing that because my vision is terrible. I can't see very well at all. I have no idea where my glasses are. I know, real responsible adult here. I really just need to buckle down, get another pair of glasses, get another eye exam, and get another pair of glasses. Because it does affect my art, unfortunately. But that's why with the phone videos, I need to extend the steering wheel well out quite a bit. It's often very dark compared to my other videos with the other camera. It's because I don't, for some reason, when I'm doing comic stuff, I really have to hunch over the page even more so than watercolor. So really, when you're doing your roughs, if you're like me, okay, let's say you see this video and you're like, I can't imagine this, but you're like, I want to make comics the way Becca does. So at this stage, my focus is correct anatomy, or correct enough that if I scan it and I need to make adjustments, I know what I'm doing in Photoshop or the correction program of your choice, whatever you're comfortable with. And definitely to get the background perspective down, at least well enough that, again, if I need to make digital corrections, I can very easily do so. So my concern is not perfect. My concern, honestly, isn't even good looking. My concern is just accurate enough that I can clean it up at another stage. And I am afforded that luxury for the most part because I'm not in classes anymore. I graduated quite a while back. So there isn't a professor who I need to turn this into and who needs to, you know, be in love with my roughs and approve them. But also, and I'm going to use this because I'm going to draw my mom next and I don't want to smear the graphite. So I'm using a clean sheet of scrap paper. And honestly, I'm going to tighten this up in subsequent stages. So Alright guys, so I'm sorry that I finished the panel without you, but I am seriously trying to get my phone to work for me, so I have to make some accommodations. So as you can see, we've tightened up and fleshed out that car. All I really did was finish the image in graphite. You can see it is a lot tighter than what the blue pencil lines would have implied. Now I have a close-up right here, and I'm just going to go ahead and only cover on that side because I don't really need to cover the whole thing. And I had left my 2 sheets of paper in place from where I'd placed them before. Since this is on the same tier, no point in making, you know, moving all that. Right, so grab my reference. At least until and even though it's my mom, it's still a character design. So I know what my mom looks like, and she doesn't look like that anymore. And this is when she was 43, and I'm not, it would be impolite to give away a lady's age, but she's not 43 and I'm not 13 anymore, so I'll let you guys do that math. So having the reference on hand helps me keep the character consistent, which isn't the hugest thing in the rough stage, but it'll help me save time later on if I don't have to make a bunch of corrections. And even for stuff that may not directly show up in the panel, I'm still drawing it out, drawing it through. And for me, doing only one rough per day is better on my hand. It allows me to sort of keep all the other balls I've got in the air going. It's just a more sustainable way for me to do roughs without leading to burnout. That does mean compared to some artists, I probably produce a little slower, but I also know that compared to some artists, I produce a little quicker, and I definitely have more detailed backgrounds than some people, so I don't really fret regarding time. Sorry, I'm checking against what I'd drawn in the prior panel. That's the only problem with taping this stuff down if you are a traditional artist, is you do have to move your paper around a fair amount. Basically, as long as I plan effectively, and that was something I meant to show you guys. I wanted to show you guys my schedule for this project because I have to complete 12 finished comic pages, and I had 38 days to do that. And for some of you, that's going to sound like a lot, and for some of you, that's going to sound like a nightmare. And for me, it was right in that sweet spot between nightmare and totally doable. And the reason for that is I have a couple trips in that time period. I have my big con of the year later in April. This is due on the 31st, and I have my big con in April, so this is seriously biting into my con prep time. And I've been getting migraines almost every day lately. And I do see a neurologist, and I do need to pay to see my neurologist again. Let me make sure I'm on the screen. So, but I've been down a lot lately. And most days I do try to get something done regardless of the headache. But you know, there's some days where the headache is just so bad. It's everything I can do not to throw up everywhere. So I do want to draw with haste. That way, if something unfortunate should happen, I'm not completely in a hole. Oh, I really need to... She looks a little crazy. Hopefully I can fix that when I tighten it up. And also, not that I'm going to, heaven forbid, I am not recording every page. This is already taking me 3 times as long as it should have taken me just dealing with camera problems. And I have to keep checking because my phone will not notify me before it just decides to quit recording. So if I were, let's say I were to record every page, every stage, which I would have already fallen off the wagon for because I did not record the thumbnails with good reason, it would just take a monumental amount of time for me. So being able to plan around your, let's move his head down a bit, he is a little kid. Being able to plan around your own, the shortcomings you know you have, as well as just to best take advantage of your skill set and your time is an important skill in comics, kind of regardless of whether or not you work on a deadline. I mean, Kara is sort of a self-set deadline, and I still work on a set schedule for Kara. And speaking of, if you're enjoying what I'm doing here, you can read finished 7-inch Kara pages. This is not Kara, this is Cicada Summer. This is a different project. But you can read some of my other comic work now for free as a webcomic. Chapter 1 and all of Chapter 1 is up. And we've started Chapter 2. Or you can order yourself a copy of the comic and get the first 4 chapters and a bonus story. I had to put Chapter 7 roughs on hold so I could focus on making sure this got priority because this has the earlier deadline. Oh, he's so sad. He's got to pee. So that's unfortunate for me because I'm like only 5 roughs short of the chapter being all roughed out. But this is super important, and if I have any free time, it's going to be spent trying to knock out another rough that day. That way, I'm going to probably want to pull in a bit so that both of his eyes are in this shot. So I'm going to go ahead and pencil him even outside of the shot so that I'm not having to redraw too much. And then that leaves only, let me move these actually, that leaves only 3 panels left for this page, and we can say adios. Well, that, or I can show you guys my schedule, and we can talk about scheduling and planning your comic and sort of planning around any sort of events you might have, or if you have a known disability that causes health concerns, to sort of try and schedule around that. I know some people is much more extreme than just migraines. And in general, I rotate my page a lot in order to get the optimal angle for drawing any particular object. I really don't have the room here to do that, so I've actually been rotating my body around the page, which is awkward. But you know, you do what you gotta do to get the comic done. I'm gonna overdraw it, draw a little past the panel border, because I'm gonna pull in a little bit digitally. And even though I am going to tighten this up before inking, I don't really want to have to spend too much time redrawing stuff. What I'm probably going to redraw is I'm probably going to tighten up the eyes and the faces a little bit, because those can always benefit from another pass, even if you're working in a very simple style like I am for Cicada Summer. Alright, so that panel is done. Go ahead and remove these pages and move on. Alright, let me just zoom out there. So we are ending on, I feel like, sort of a highlight. You know, the last 3 panels should be fairly easy to execute. I could tape off the tops. In fact, I think I will, but I did want to give you guys an overall look at the page so far, all the progress we've made together before I tape it off. And I tape these off often to protect the artwork on top, not just to give myself more drawing room. And even in panels where I sort of fudge at the anatomy. I don't fudge, I mean fudge at the perspective, I don't fudge the anatomy. I guess people are more important to me than environments. But I do think environments are very important, and I feel like they should be treated with personality, and they should look distinct and like they belong to the characters who are inhabiting them. And that's something I'm going to talk about a lot soon. So I'm really sorry about the interruption in service earlier. Like I told you guys, I've been having problems with my phone all day, and it died on me in the middle of it even though I was charging. So I had to take a break, and I'm resuming what we're doing now. And I'm just working on those bottom 3 panels. So I can call this rough done. That would actually be lower. Dang, my hand is really locking up on me. If you are drawing along at home, I highly recommend you frequently take stretch breaks. I actually did take a stretch break. I don't know why my hand is locking up so much, other than I'm bearing down too hard on a hard surface. So if you can, also try to work with something underneath your paper to sort of cushion. And I'll just go ahead and blue line all 3 panels. And that way we can kind of make some progress on today. And before I let you guys go, I know it's been a long one, but I do want to take a moment and show you guys my planner and how I scheduled this out. I really should have let in with that, I think. You know, All right, final panel to pencil. I will be super happy to have this finished. I think I'm going to actually pencil these off camera, and that way I can sort of do it more at my own leisure and in a better situation. But like I said, I'll check in with you guys, not only to show you guys my schedule, but to show you guys this finished page. Which is going to be the first of 12 for me. And then I'll check back in with you guys on this project when I am starting to pencil and ink, because I think we haven't really talked a whole lot about pencils and inking, about those types of comic making processes on this channel. I did go over them in sort of a workshop I recorded, which is available online on the channel for you guys in the Intro to Comic Craft playlist. But I did record a tutorial where I did some inking, but we've never really spent a whole lot of time inking comic pages. We've done Inktober tutorials, and I've inked things for you that I then watercolored or used other media on top of. But this time we're going to be focusing on our inks as our standalone medium. So I'm about finished with this, so I'll see you guys in a bit. Okay, so we finished this page. Now all I really need to do is, ta-da, remove that, and we've got a finished ruff. That only took forever, but as you guys see, once you have the basic steps down, it's just a repetition of those steps. So I will check in with you guys in a moment when we'll talk about scheduling. Guys, so for the final installment of this video, we're going to talk about scheduling this sort of a project. And this is going to be perhaps, hopefully, the most important part for many of us. When I was in grad school, I had to tackle a lot of projects in a short period of time and do multiple things at any given time. So my mantra became, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time. I know it's not a very good mantra, but that's how you think about comics. That's how you approach comics. You take the whole, you break it down into segments. So for this pitch, I needed 12 completed pages. That meant I needed to have an idea of the overall story for the book, which I'd been talking about for a while. I needed to have an idea for the individual chapter I wanted to cover, which after some brainstorming I did. I needed a tight script to work from, thumbnails, roughs, to pencil the pages, and then to ink the pages. So I made a list of all the things I needed to complete and the amount of time I thought I could complete them in. So for thumbs, I originally had 3 a day. I attempted 4 a day, but that, 3 a day, fine. So 4 days, roughs 1 a day, 1 rough per day for 12 days, pencils and inks 1 page each day for 12 days, scanning, lettering, cleanup, 2 days total. So my total is, it's going to take me 31 days to complete this project. At the time I made this list, I had 38 days until it was due, which meant I had about 7 days to sort of mess around with. And then I'm also going to be losing time at the end of the month. So the next thing I did, and this is the calendar view on my planner, and I've talked about this for you guys in the past, how I get so much done. Over here you see the planning and development stage for my Cicada Summer crawfish boil chapter. So that's 3 days there, and then I couldn't get at it for 5 days, unfortunately. And then, as soon as I got back, I knew I had to hit the ground running because I'd lost a lot of time. So I used highlighters to color coordinate my time. So here's the roughs, here's the inks, here's going to be the day for color correction, the day for lettering, and to create the PDF, and then submitting the PDF, which I wanted to do early, and I'm actually 1, 2, 3, 4 days early if I can do it by the 28th. That is a big if I don't get sick, if I don't get a migraine, if my cat doesn't get sick, if some disaster doesn't happen. I do like having some buffer days just in case, with the deadline being on April 1st. Now, script is done, thumbnails are done, character designs are done, did my first rough, so I should be well on track, but I'm going to try to buy myself even more time by doubling up on some of the lighter pages where I do 2 in 1 day. So, I've done this before. This is how I got my thesis comic finished. This is how I got my thesis finished. I just really heavily relied on calendars, visual cues, and sticking to the schedule. That's how you get through Inktober. It's how you get through any monthly challenge. You just put your one foot in front of the other every single day, and you don't make excuses. I mean, that's how people who are exercising to lose weight, that's how they lose the weight. You got to approach comics, especially comics, on a strict deadline with that same mindset. And I've been in loads of anthologies, and this method has worked really well for tackling that as well. So thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. For the last time, I apologize for the issues my camera has thrown up. Hopefully that will not be a problem in later videos. I hope you guys enjoyed this sort of tutorial demonstration thing where we made a rough together and then I talked about my schedule with you guys. I hope I inspire you to plan your own comic, start your own comic, or maybe pitch something to an anthology. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like. If you've got any questions, leave a comment down below and I'll try to help you out. And if you really enjoyed this video, sharing it with your friends or loved ones would help me out immensely. Your positive word of mouth does so much more than any amount of promotion I could possibly do. Will help me out so much more than that. So please, please, please be generous and share. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully I'll see you again really soon. Bye!